العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, you know the month of Ramadan, a week is gone. Like an entire week in the month of Ramadan is done, it's gone. And there's 4 of these, so alhamdulillah, we still have some anticipation for the days that are coming. And we're looking forward to what lies ahead. But the reality is that just as quickly as these 7 days have come and gone, the next few weeks will come just as quickly, if not even quicker. And they'll be gone, and we'll be celebrating Eid. And then after Eid, life will return back to normal. Life will return back to normal. The masajid will not be as full as they are right now. Qur'an will not be recited as much as it is being recited right now. And ultimately, our connection with Allah Azza wa Jalla, there's a beauty to it. There's a beauty to the fact that it is the greatest in the month of Ramadan. Because the month of Ramadan is a month that was specially chosen by Allah Azza wa Jalla. It's a month that was specially chosen by Allah Azza wa Jalla over all of the other months. There are certain days that Allah Azza wa Jalla chooses. Allah Azza wa Jalla chose the day of Friday over the other days in the week. There are certain months that Allah Azza wa Jalla chooses, such as the month of Ramadan. There are certain times that Allah Azza wa Jalla chooses, such as, Sa'at al-Istijabah, when your du'as are answered. The Prophet ﷺ was chosen over all of mankind. The Anbiya, they were chosen over the rest of mankind. So Allah chooses and He picks as He wills. And He has ultimate hikmah. And He has ultimate mercy in how He chooses and dedicates certain times and certain people over others. Islam, when it came, it's very interesting, right? When Islam came, who did Allah Azza wa Jalla send the religion to? Who were chosen as the people to carry the message of Islam to the rest of the world? During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Arabia was this empty desert land. Let's take a moment, let's go back. Let's kind of build this story from the beginning. Arabia was an empty desert land. You had Mecca, you had Yathrib, you had a few of these places. Some trade used to exist, but essentially they were nomadic people for the most part. They didn't have much in terms of, this rich, science and arts and cultures. And that's not to suggest that this didn't exist in the world. It did exist in the world at that time. Even if you go back and you look into the civilizations that predate Islam, there's a lot of, rich man-made ideas. Of course, we know from our religion, the Anbiya, they came with the messages, right? They came with the message of Islam. Musa alayhi salam came with the message of Islam. Isa alayhi salam, he came with the message of Islam. Before them, the Anbiya kept coming and coming and coming to Bani Israel with the message of Islam. But the people, they kept distorting it. The people, they kept distorting it. They kept ruining it. They kept perverting it. They kept corrupting it. They just kept messing it up left and right. And they developed something out of this. You had civilizations such as the Indian civilization that had a rich culture of, philosophy and art and so on and so forth. You had, of course, the Greek culture that was most famously known for their mythology, and then what developed out of that mythology was their philosophy and everything. Persians, of course, at that time, Faris, they also had the same thing. So you had all of these cultures that were competing, right? You had all of these cultures that were competing. And when you look at the geographical location of these places, they're rich. They have a lot of greenery. They have a lot of, good weather conditions. It's very good for farming, for example. So civilization is built around these places. They're built around places like Iraq. They're built around places like, the Greco-Roman lands. They're built around these areas. In the middle of all of this, you have Arabia. Now, Arabia is a place that, to those people was so worthless that they fought wars. Wars was very well known. The Persian Empire fought the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. They kept fighting back and forth, right? We know about this in the Qur'an as well. This kept happening back and forth, but nobody wanted to invade Arabia. They didn't want to invade Arabia because also, what are you going to achieve out of it? What are you going to get? What are you going to extract? And keep in mind, this isn't a time when they didn't realize oil was there, right? They weren't that technologically developed. If they had known oil was there, everything would be totally different. There might have been Mercedes there, back then. But they didn't realize that oil was there. So it's a dead land. It's a dead land, right? There's nothing there. However, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He chose of all of the places to send the final religion, the religion that would persist and last above all other ways of life, that would stand in competition to all of these quote-unquote great human civilizations until that point, and would triumph over them, defeat them, ruin them, desecrate them, destroy them, and make them cease to exist within a matter of 2 or 3 decades, right? Within under 100 years. And all of these lands, they became Muslim. What was that secret? What is that secret? Why is it that they were able to do what they were able to do? Now, of course, they had the Prophet ﷺ, and they had the Qur'an, and they had all these things. When we go back into the root, it's very important to understand why Allah Azza wa Jalla picked them above all else. Allah Azza wa Jalla, when He describes the Prophet ﷺ, He says, An-Nabi al-Ummi. And when He describes the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, He describes them as an Ummiyun. Now, people tend to translate this, and often incorrectly, as being illiterate. Now, the word illiterate in the English language, it has a bad connotation. It means uneducated, somebody that doesn't have knowledge, somebody that is ignorant, so on and so forth. That's not what is meant in the Arabic language when you say Ummi. That's not what's meant at all. It means the inability to read and write, right? Now, the ability to read and write, there's a false misconception that exists in the minds of people that says that is the only way that education is acquired. That's not true. The Arab, they were very fasih, they were people of language, they were people of memory, and that's how they transferred everything. Their memory was so strong, that they would see something once, they would look at something once, it's almost like they had photographic memory. They would memorize it immediately, and they would narrate it in the perfect detail in which it was preserved to the next generations. And they preserved culture, and they preserved tradition, and they preserved above all else their shira, their language. Think about it. In a culture that is dry and arid and doesn't allow for civilization to thrive and to exist, they produce one of the most detailed languages. If you go back into Nahwu and Sarf and you see how the language is built, oh my God, it is such a mathematical language, such a deep language. It is, it has so much depth. Like all of that beauty, all of that art is not without functionalism. It's based on very mathematical, grounded, words and utterances and speech. This was something that was a mu'jiza for them. Allah Azza wa Jalla decided to send Islam to these people. Why? They were al-Ummi. The word Ummi goes back, of course, we can trace it, the word right? The word refers to the mother. It refers to the mother. So you have children, right? The children, they're in their homes with their mothers, and then slowly they grow up and they start interacting with the outside world. At the beginning, they're in their mother's cradle and they're in the arms, and then slowly but surely they start to crawl around, and then they start to walk around, and then they start to open doors and push down the doors that have been there to protect them. And they start going out and they start exploring the world. Now, when they start exploring the world, what happens? Of course, they learn a lot, but they also take a lot of the corruption that exists in the outside world and they start, exhibiting a lot of these behaviors. And they become by nature, they become corrupted a little bit. As we grow older, as we get more exposure, we're corrupted with all of the perversions that the society we live in has to offer. So when the Prophet ﷺ is described as a Nabi al-Ummi, and the Arab of that time, they're described as an Ummiyun. This doesn't mean that they're uneducated, or they're dumb, or they don't know anything. It means they're pure. It means that they have not been, their minds, their intellects, their ideas, their expressions have not been filtered by this corrupt, man-made thought and philosophy and belief that exists in all of these other cultures and ways of life and civilizations that existed at that time, like the Greeks and the Persians and so on and so forth. There's an important lesson to be had here, which is how we're going to start coming to the point at hand. Which is that when you come to the religion of Islam, you have to come as an empty vessel. You have to come as an empty vessel. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. It is not for a believing man, nor for a believing woman, that when Allah and His Messenger have revealed a decree that they should have an opinion in their matters. What do the believers say? سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا غُفْرَانَكَ رَبَّنَا وَإِلَيْكَ الْمَصِيرُ. We hear and we obey. Allah says in the Qur'an, "Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa," come in a state of complete submission and obedience. Of course, this also refers to the group. That's how we come to Islam. Unfortunately, we live in a society today that is really filled with so much, corruption, that is filled with so many deviant ideas and beliefs that surround us, that plague us and our children. I mean, you send them to school, now they have all these policies that they're coming out with, especially in Europe, that makes a parent even question whether I can send my child to school. The idea is that we're not coming to this religion as empty vessels. If we truly want to benefit from the religion of Islam, we have to clean our hearts. We have to empty our hearts of all of this deviance and perversion in which we have been raised. And then we have to allow the Qur'an to enter our hearts, to illuminate our hearts, to lighten our hearts, and then that light will radiate and shine around us. And we will be able to spread it by the will and mercy of Allah Azza wa Jalla to the society around us. This was why Allah Azza wa Jalla chose the Arab. He chose the Arab above all else. Why? Because they were not polluted as much. Now they have I'm not saying that they didn't have haram or they didn't have evil habits. They were, of course, they loved wine and they loved zina and these sorts of things. This was common. But this is human shaitan tendency. What we're talking about is these intellectual forms of corruption that make you question very basic things. In the US, I think just a week or two ago, they have these Supreme Court nominations, right? So when one Supreme Court retires or passes away, they decide to appoint another one. So Biden decided to appoint specifically an African American woman. He said that was the criteria. And that, woman that he appointed and that he chose and nominated was just confirmed yesterday. She was there, she was sitting on the chair, and one of the congresswomen, she asked her, she said, what does it mean to be a woman? Or what define a woman for me, basically? And she was stuttering. She was afraid to say something that, might cancel her. She couldn't give you a definition of a woman. She said, I'm not a biologist. You have to be if I ask you what is 2 plus 2, and I say, is it 4? She says, no, I'm not a mathematician. This is the type of stupidity that has started to pervade in our societies, and the society in which we live. And of course it's affecting the youth. So when we come to Islam, the idea is we come to Islam, how? Empty. We come to Islam ready to receive. And it doesn't mean that we forget everything that we've learned, no. But we understand ultimately that everything that we've learned is the product of human endeavor, and that has mistakes and shortcomings, and ultimately all the proofs that we have lead us to the understanding that there is a creator, there is Allah, and Allah is ultimately who is wise, who has the truth, and we obey. We listen and we obey. That is why at the beginning of the Qur'an, Allah Azza wa Jalla says what? He says, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. This is a book in which there is no doubt. Then when he says, الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. He says it is a guidance. But who's it a guidance for? Is it a guidance for everybody? No. He says, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. At least here it's not a guidance for everybody. At the very beginning of the Qur'an, it's not something that has been shown to be a guidance for everybody. You have to be from the muttaqeen. You have to be from those who are conscious of Allah Azza wa Jalla. But what does that really mean? What does it mean to be conscious of Allah Azza wa Jalla, such that you might benefit? I mean, you're opening the Qur'an for the first time, right? So how can you have any understanding? You just heard Fatiha, you have nothing else. Pretend a non-Muslim is reading it. They have no idea what they're going to read. But they see that it is a guidance for those who have taqwa. The understanding of this is that taqwa, what is intended by taqwa here is sincerity. You must be sincere. You must have the right intention. You must be conscious of Allah Azza wa Jalla. You must be seeking Allah Azza wa Jalla. People go to the Qur'an and they want to study the Qur'an, they want to learn the Qur'an, not so that they can benefit, not so that they can change their lives, not so that they can please Allah, not so that they can get closer to the truth and rectify their lives and their societies. No, they want to engage with the Qur'an so that they can prove it wrong, for example. You know, they can try to prove it wrong. Or that they can make a career out of it. Or that they can fulfill, you know, their worldly desires in so many different ways. That is why many people engage with the Qur'an. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith that is authentic, he says, the meaning of which is, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْفَعُ بِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ أَقْوَامًا وَيَضَعُ بِهِ الْآخَرِينَ. Indeed, Allah raises a people with this book, and He lowers others with it. He honors a people with this book, and He debases and humiliates other people with this book. Now, of course, we know a person who recites the Qur'an with sincerity, a person who listens to the Qur'an with sincerity, as the Shaykh told us earlier, the person who does tadabbur of the Qur'an with sincerity, all of these people will be honored and raised by Allah Azza wa Jalla in this dunya and in the akhirah.